Thank you very much, Congressman, for your time for Cafe DC.
Cafe DC, good.
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Right here. Thank you. You are a very busy member of Congress, ranking member at that of the Select Intelligence Committee, Armed Forces Committee. You make a lot of foreign trips. Do you find time for coffee breaks?
Well, let me say this: the prioritizing your time is very important. But what's more important is that you have a good team and a good staff who can work with you and work for your constituents and help me do what I need to do, and that includes my calendar. One of the worst issues that we do have to deal with is the constant demand for people to see you. That's a positive in a way, but there's just so many people, you can't see everyone. I came from local government where you were closest to the people, and I really miss the being out in the community every day. Well, when you're elected to Congress, you're elected to go to Washington. I specialize in intelligence. I'm now the top Democratic leader on the Intelligence Committee. We have to provide the oversight for all of the intelligence community. There's 16 different communities. NSA is in my district. All the different communities, and we know how volatile the world is now between Iran and the Middle East and Afghanistan and all the things that are occurring. So there's just a lot that we're doing right now.
Speaking of Iran, you just came back from Israel.
Yeah.
What's the sentiment there on Israel? I mean, are they going to attack Iran? Or
this is what we do. Chairman Rogers, who's chairman of the committee, and I went to Israel. We met with Netanyahu in our capacity, being members of Congress, and with Barak and other leadership in Israel. Iran is a very dangerous country. Their leadership is exporting terrorism. They're trying to build a bomb that they basically have said that they will wipe Israel off the face of the earth. The world has to step up and stop that. One of the things that my conversation was with the leadership, including Netanyahu, is that Israel and the United States, we do not need to continue the dialogue in the media. We need to say to Iran that we're together, that we're not going to allow Iran to continue to export terrorism and to build a bomb that will kill other people. But we have to do other issues. We have to let sanctions work before you get to the ultimate issue of war. But if in fact that Iran refuses to stop building nuclear weapons that will kill people, then you have to lay all options on the table. So I think that when the leadership is now coming over to the United States now, hopefully we will be on the same wavelength. Another issue that's very important, in my capacity on the Intelligence Committee, we work closely with the President on the Libya issue, a very serious issue. But what's really unique, and that formula works, is that it just wasn't the United States who was being involved and being the sheriff of the whole world. It was NATO, it was the Arab League. They all came together and said, this is wrong, innocent people are being killed. So I think if we can use that formula, say to Iran, it's time to stop, and if you don't, there are going to be consequences. But we're giving you the opportunity to come to the table now and work out these issues.
So you think there's an understanding in Israel of the position of the United States?
I think Israel knows that we will always stand behind them. We're not going to allow them to be attacked and to their people to be killed. We're their allies, but we have to do it the right way. War is only the last option, and there are other options we can use, hopefully, to change the policy of Iran.
So an Iranian attack on Israel is not imminent, so to speak?
I can't predict, and if I could, telling you, there are certain things I can't talk about that are classified. Absolutely. But I will say this: I think there's a lot of dialogue going on, and I think again, my recommendation to both Netanyahu and to President Obama is let's get the world behind this issue. Let's get the Arab League involved in saying Iran with nuclear weapons is unacceptable. They will use it to kill people. They've shown they'll do that now. They've shown that they were going to attempt to assassinate the ambassador of Saudi Arabia in the United States without any regard for our sovereignty or any regard for human and American lives.
Congressman, obviously you are a very people-oriented member of Congress. You spend a lot of time with your constituents. What drives you? What is the motivation of your such hard work and dedication?
I think you really, if you're in this job, you want to help people. You want to make a difference. You use your expertise, hopefully, to do the right thing. I've been lucky that I have been able to move up in leadership, and now that I'm in leadership in the Intelligence Committee, National Security, this is something that I used to do as a former investigative prosecutor years ago. But again, it goes back to the people that are working with you, and our job in Congress is to provide oversight. But I have a unique story how I got into politics.
Please.
I was an investigative prosecutor coming home from work in a police car, and I was in a very serious accident. I was taken to Maryland Shock Trauma, which is considered to be the top trauma system in the world. Or I wouldn't be, if I weren't for Shock Trauma being in Maryland, I wouldn't be here now talking to you. When I got to Shock Trauma, I had all sorts of broken bones. I had serious head injuries that they told my wife I probably wouldn't make it through the night because of the brain swelling. But I have asthma, and I was on prednisone before the accident, so my brain didn't swell. So a negative into a positive. And I've always believed in life that you learn from your negatives and you move forward. So after I had 47 pints of blood, I had all sorts of problems. I was in Maryland Shock Trauma for about a month. I was on respirators and that type thing. When I got out, I went to the man who started Maryland Shock Trauma. His name's R.A. Cali. He was a MASH doctor in Korea. And I said, you created a system that saved my life. What can I do to help? He said, run for office. And that's how I got in politics. To this day, I'm still vice chair of the Board of Trustees for Maryland Shock Trauma. And I work very closely with them, Department of Defense, helping these troops, these men and women who are hurt or maimed in Iraq and Afghanistan, trying to give them the best medical care that we can give them.
So for several years you're in Baltimore, and then for the last 10 years you've been in Congress, I guess.
I was in local government for over 17 years. I was a former investigative prosecutor. After that, I ran for Baltimore County Council, and I was a county councilman for 9.5 years. I then ran for Baltimore County Executive, and I beat an incumbent in that job, and I was termed out after 8 years. I then ran for Congress, and I've been in Congress now going into my 9th year. I love my job. There are some issues. One of those major issues are the traffic. You know, it takes me sometimes 2.5 hours in the morning to get to work. From Baltimore to Washington, but I don't feel too bad for myself when I think of the people who live in California. And so then I start saying, well, it's not as bad as I think. And it only takes me an hour, non-rush hour. I don't like partisan politics. My philosophy is that you're loyal to your party at election time, but when the election's over, you work together. That's what the people want. And that's the problem we're having in Congress now. Too much idealistic issues and not really looking on what's right for your constituents and your people. And you know, the other thing none of us like, but we have to do it or get our message out, is raising money. And those are the things I don't like. Other than that, I do wish that I could spend more time with my family. But the good news, when I was in local government for 17 years, my children were young, so I stayed at home. Now I coach kids in sports, and I have a daughter and a son, and I coach them in sports. So I would come from work. I would change my clothes in my car, put my coaching clothes on. When I finished coaching my kids' teams, then I would go back, put my suit on, and go out to my community meetings. But I was at home for 17 years. Now that I'm in Congress, I still try to come home as much as I can. But sometimes if I have a 7:30 meeting, I'm not going to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to make that. But normally I come home as much as I can. Occasionally I will stay over in Washington, D.C.
Speaking of family, you've been married for 43 years.
And that's kind of a record in politics.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're a moderate, a member of the Democratic Party. A lot of people overseas, they see America as a very liberal society. And here is a member of Congress belonging to the Democratic Party, setting up, showing to the world such good values, family values. You know, again, what's the reason? You know.
Well, I try to live by the 3 F's sometimes. Okay. Faith, family, and friends. And also the golden rule, you know, do unto others as you've had them do unto you.
Faith, family,
and friends. The 3 F's, faith, family, and friends, and the golden rule. Yeah. And I think that's something it's important, and yet it's a big sacrifice for your family. You know, unfortunately, politics has gotten pretty negative. You seem in election time to always be attacked for your negative. But more importantly, you're not home as much. And when you are going out, like if I go out to dinner with my wife, people always come up and talk to you. Well, I love it because I like people, but my wife doesn't have a lot of time with me. So your spouse really is sacrificing a lot. But the good news, again, we've raised our children. I have 2 beautiful grandchildren with another on the way. They're 2 and 4 years old. That's the love of my life. That's the joy of my life. So those are the things that you really you always remember to stay grounded and the basics: faith, family, and friends.
Beautiful, beautiful. For our audiences overseas, you know, they have many emerging democracies, fledgling democracies. In your opinion, what's an ideal profile of a lawmaker or a public servant?
Democracy in the United States isn't always what democracy might be in other countries. Some countries that have been ruled by a strong leader. And so it's very important when you have democracy that you have a constitution that will give people freedom, you know, the ability to communicate, the ability to live their lives the way they want, not be concerned. Our First Amendment issues are very important, free speech. But it's important that we in the United States don't always attempt to impose our standards on different cultures or different countries. And it's up to those countries, hopefully, to care about people, to have a standard of law that will allow freedom, but you also have to provide safety too. So there's always a balance that occurs there. And I believe strongly you need to deal closely with your children. I'll give an example in Pakistan. Pakistan, and I've been there numerous occasions in my role in the Intelligence Committee, but when I see Pakistan's budget, I see only 1.5% of their budget is going to education. I think that's wrong. I think if you look at the successes of this country, especially after World War II, that we put in a lot of money to allow people to go to higher education when they didn't have the money. We were giving student loans. We weren't giving it for free, but student loans. And I think that's important to let the younger generation go as far as they can when it comes to education. So I think education is a major issue for countries. I think you have to find ways to help people that don't have jobs and are very poor. You don't want to create a dependent society and give them money. You want to give them incentives and training so they can have a job, and that will make the country feel a lot better. Egypt, as an example, there's a lot of unrest going on in Egypt right now, and there's a lot of, in the beginning, what occurred there was very unique. It'll go down in history, social media, but now Egypt has a lot of problems as far as jobs and the economy. And if the economy continues to go south and people don't have jobs, that's going to cause unrest in that government. So, you know, I think we need to learn of our successes in the United States, how we have conducted democracy, but it doesn't always mean that it's exactly the same type of government democracy that we have.
Pakistan, you mentioned Pakistan. You've been to that country quite a few times.
I just came back about 4 or 5 months ago, meeting with General Kiani and Pasha, who's the head of their intelligence. Yes,
and must have met the president as well.
We didn't meet with the president that time. We were there. Chairman Rogers and I were there for only a short time.
I see.
It was right after the Bin Laden issue.
I think there is a consensus in this town that Pakistan is an important ally.
We are an important ally. We need each other.
Yeah, but the relations are kind of on the downside these days. Are you concerned?
Yeah, I'm concerned. And one of the reasons we went to Pakistan to meet, with the General Kiani was to let them know that we do need each other. We do have an ultimate threat, an enemy, and that's terrorism. Terrorism hurts people. It kills people. It's not where any country wants to go. So I think it's important. And a lot of about life is trust and relationships. And we have a history with Pakistan. We've worked well with Pakistan, and there have been some times when we have not. So I think it's about communication. I think we had to let things settle down, and hopefully that relationship will move forward. But relationships have to be for the benefit of both sides. So we have to understand the United States of America, that Pakistan has their issues, we have our issues. Let's find a common ground where we can work together for the benefit of our citizens and our constituents.
Just in the last few days, there have been statements on two very important issues. Number one, Iran, that Pakistan wouldn't accept any pressure on their trade and relations with Iran, any U.S. pressure, number one. Number two, the case of Dr. Afridi, the doctor who helped track Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. Do you feel that there is a middle ground where they can meet on Iran and both on Dr. Shakil Afridi?
I would hope we could, but again, we have to understand as Americans that Pakistan has a different relationship with Iran than maybe we do. We think, in my opinion, Iran is a it's a country that's exporting terrorism. It's a dangerous country, and it will cause instability in the whole world, including Pakistan. I think if every country that has nuclear weapons now, they have a good system. They understand how dangerous nuclear weapons are, and so all these countries that have nuclear weapons. I understand the friction between India and between Pakistan, and that needs to be resolved and worked through. So, I think with time, we will work through those issues together. As far as the doctor is concerned, the thing that concerns me about Pakistan's position as it relates to the doctor, first thing, the doctor felt, from what I know, that he was helping his country dealing with terrorism. He didn't know who was in the area. He was a doctor. And he felt very strongly, I'm patriotic. The doctor had the ability, if he wanted to, probably to leave Pakistan if he wanted to, before he was arrested. And so when thinking that I'm a person who's helping my country, so I'm not involved in that now. I just know what I'm saying at this point. But these are issues where we feel we have an innocent person, and then Pakistan sees it from another point of view. Let's work this out. Let's resolve this issue so both parties benefit. And again, when it comes to what's going on in Afghanistan right now, I think Pakistan needs us. We need them to really focus on the ultimate enemy of terrorism. And if we allow Afghanistan to be what it was, to be an open area for training of terrorists, the same thing in certain of the tribal areas in Pakistan, the same thing. Those terrorists and those individuals that are being trained to kill other people, that's not to Pakistan's benefit. Pakistan has lost many lives to terrorism, just as we have as Americans.
The Gang of Eight, if it's not classified, would you talk about it?
Well, if it was, I wouldn't tell you anyhow. Okay.
Can you please talk about it? I mean, you are a member of that gang. It's a very important position to be in.
There are 8 of us.
You get briefed by the president, on important matters.
One of the things that makes our country so unique, if you look at our history, is our Constitution. And that's the checks and balances between the administration and the president, between the judiciary, and between Congress. So we have that checks and balances. If you have just all the power in the administration, then you have kind of a military state.
Right.
If you were a general and I didn't like you and I was your next door neighbor, you could have me arrested, and without having justice or a trial and that type of thing. So the Gang of Eight was created to get the most sensitive information, so sensitive that if that information got out, it could cause serious damage to people, to countries, people's lives. It would just be very, very serious. Now, the Intelligence Committee that I'm the Democratic leader on the Intelligence Committee. We get most of the sensitive information, and we do that because we oversee our intelligence communities, our military, and that type of thing. But the Gang of Eight, this is information so sensitive that we are, the Gang of Eight is the only Americans to get this information, and we get it in a very classified way.
Directly from the president?
Well, from the administration, the president or the administration. But what that does, and the reason for that, is the check and balance, to make sure that the administration has Congress there overseeing that. And that's why the Gang of Eight has really
And these
created.
8 members, they're
an example of the Gang of Eight when it was used is in the Bin Laden. That was the perfect example.
So you were privy
of
the, you were one of the...
When it first came in and that we felt that this was the area, that was an issue and yet that was so sensitive. We could not, there could not be any leaks. It was information that only need-to-know basis.
Were you in that room with that iconic picture?
No, I was not. No, you mean, I've been in the Situation Room, but not for there. The last time I was in the Situation Room was on the Libya issue.
I see.
Which, by the way, if you look at what happened with Libya, the United States cannot continue to be the sheriff of the whole world. I said in the beginning of this interview, it's extremely important that we have the world come and stand up against terrorists, against Iran getting a nuclear bomb, against North Korea having the ability to fire and kill other people. Iran exporting terrorism, giving weapons to Hezbollah and to other groups such as this. So I think the formula that was used in Libya, we didn't put boots on the ground. We have unique resources no other country has, but it was NATO, it was the Arab League all coming together. And at least for the initial stage, it was very successful. Now, the real test, just like in Egypt and other countries, is once that leadership is gone, You know, they need to develop a government. They need to develop a leadership so they can have a functional government that'll do what's best for the people who live in those countries.
You're very big on cybersecurity, and you and Chairman Rogers have introduced a bill on cybersecurity. I think it's one of those bills, a bipartisan bill, which will probably pass, likely to pass. What do you think of the cybersecurity, globally speaking? And there are also rumors outside this country as well as in this country that there are efforts to bring down the current internet and prop a different system altogether. Is it something that you can shed some light on?
First thing you talked about bipartisan. Chairman Rogers and I probably have the most bipartisan committee on the Hill. What's at stake in what we do is so serious. You can't have partisan politics. So we try to work together, Democrats, Republicans, not just Chairman Rogers and I, but our entire committee. Now, cyber is one of the biggest threats we have in the whole world. The internet was very positive, but because of that, like anything else, it's been used to attack, it's been used to steal information, and it could be dangerous. When Russia attacked Georgia, they cyber attacked and they shut down the communication system. And that can be done. People just don't realize how serious cyber attacks are. There are certain countries right now that are cyber attacking the United States. Our Pentagon is getting billions of dollars of information, of secret information, classified information from our defense systems and our space program by cyber attacking. So we need to create a system that will clearly allow governments to protect their citizens, their businesses from these attacks. And yet it's very sensitive because you also have to make sure when you come to the internet that we protect people's civil liberties. So Chairman Rogers and I have put together a bill. It's very small. It's a record, I think, in Congress. I think it's only 13 pages. And our bill basically allows the information. NSA is one of the best in what they do in the world in cyber and understanding where their attacks are coming from and how to deal with the attacks. But NSA is more of a quasi-military agency, so their information needs to get to the private sector. And so what our bill does, it really allows the NSA to be able to give information to the providers who really are controlling the internet or have the customers, AT&T, Verizon, Quest, those groups. And then they have businesses that they provide the whole internet to, or they have individuals. They have millions of people. So they need to get the information and what we call the secret sauce to be able to act upon that to stop these cyber attacks coming. And if we don't do something from a defense point of view, I mean, there could be a catastrophic attack. I mean, a bank system, Bank of America. Just think about a major bank being attacked and money being taken out and what people's confidence would be in the banking system. Almost anything you do with a computer. Our space programs, I mean, if you have our electrical grid system is run by computers, you could really cyber attack it and shut it down. Our air traffic control, just think shutting down or attacking the cyber system or the computer system at JFK Airport in New York. Just think of that. These things can happen. And terrorists, they know they're never going to win the whole war, but they want to win battles and can disrupt. Now, I know other countries are attacking us on a regular basis, but these countries are really attacking to get information and to get data and that type of thing and to get intelligence about us and what we're doing. But really, they're not going to be trying to shut us down. They're not going to war. But I'm worried about the Al-Qaeda type groups, Iran, these type of countries that basically would hire a brilliant hacker that would come in and try to attack. So we need to do a lot more in cyber, in our cyber attacks. The country really does not know a lot about this. And there are only a few of us here in the Hill that are really trying to focus and to protect our citizens from cyber attacks.
Anything about bringing down this current internet and then maybe building something entirely new? Is it something
it's been said that probably the only way that you can really bring safety and defense is just to start it over. That's impossible. It's not going to happen. I think we have to work within the existing system. And if the United States just does it, that's not, the internet is global. So we have to work with other countries, just like I say that we need to work with other countries to stop these nations that want to kill us and kill other people. So, it's a matter of working together with the world and developing cyber systems to protect their citizens also.
Congressman, thank you very much for joining us, or a cup of coffee.
Okay, great, fine.
Cafe DC.
Cafe DC?
Yes, it's Cafe DC.
Okay, Fez, well, good to communicate with you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And I appreciate your time one more time.
Okay,
Cheers.
good.
Thank you.
Okay.